let's start with the awkward introduction. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Hi, I'm Alanah. I do a lot of things. Primarily would consider myself to be a video game writer. That is what I mostly do, but I also do podcasts and YouTube videos and Twitch streams, and everyone in LA has 10,000 jobs, so
Right.
one of those.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your origin story and how it all started?
Yeah, so I've been playing video games since I was like 4 years old, we think, and the only other passion I really had in life the whole way through was writing. So my whole life is video games and writing have been the two things I always loved. I left school and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and so I got a job at a call center, notoriously great place to work. And I was looking for jobs, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. There was a period where I thought maybe I'd be like a psychologist. I thought about doing law, all these things that didn't really inspire me. And so I was looking for work and I found a volunteer job listing for a video game news writer. And I was like, you can do that? Like at that point I was already blogging on Tumblr about game reviews and stuff like that just for fun. So I started writing as a volunteer gaming news writer and then was like, oh, this is the best thing in the world. I need to make this my life. So I went to university and studied a Bachelor of Mass Communication, majoring in journalism and creative writing. And then I started working for magazines in Australia, covering video games and a radio show. I worked on TV for a while. I was basically like every piece of it that I could do, I would start out as a volunteer. Like the radio show was community radio, the TV show, I was an intern, until I could eventually work my way into getting paid. So it was very like, I feel like I forced myself. Like I was like, I will work in this industry however I can, and I never gave up. So then, this is a very fast-track version. I knew that I wanted to work at either GameSpot or IGN as the two places you could actually work full-time in games media. And I knew that the best way to do that was to move to California. So for the last 6 months of my degree while I was still studying at school, I transferred to San Jose, so that I was near San Francisco, which is where both of those offices are. So then I was traveling to San Francisco to try to meet people who worked in the games industry, to try to network with people. Worked out great. I did have an interview with GameSpot. They couldn't afford my visa. And then I interviewed with IGN. And this is after I'd probably applied for a job there maybe like 7 or 8 times. I finally actually got a job there. It was a really specific job that worked really well with my interests. I feel like I got very lucky in that they were looking for a toys and culture editor. So they needed somebody who had experience with cosplay, which I was also doing for fun, who was big into collectibles and toys, which I had, this huge room back in Australia full of collectibles and toys. And they wanted some science writing, and I had been doing science news journalism at university. So it was like, perfect job. Got very lucky. So I got that job. I worked there for 3 years and realized while I was working at IGN, while I still love talking about video games in an editorial capacity, and that's still definitely a thing I do, that the most fun I had at that job was talking to game developers. I realized that every time that I got to visit a studio, we go over all over the world for IGN First, which is like a basically preview coverage. You get to see a game early and talk to devs. It just like lit a fire inside of me, and I was like, that's what I'm doing next. So I built out a game plan, made movies. So it was my way of getting more into fiction writing. Obviously it was a thing I'd done my whole life for fun, but not professionally. Started doing game jams, same basically process that I got to start with, which is just do stuff for free as much as I can. Not a thing I recommend for everybody. You can be taken advantage of, but it definitely worked for my career for sure. I was picking up, little bits and pieces of different creative writing while also working there. And then thing that never happens, Sony Santa Monica Studio, who are known for making God of War, had a job opening for a junior writer. Again, never happens. So rare in AAA gaming. So I jumped at that. Context there is I'd also applied for 4 jobs before that at different game studios trying to get a writing position, didn't have enough experience. So I interviewed for that. I don't know, it was like 8 interviews maybe, like writing samples, like a long process to get the job at a studio like that, and ended up working there for the last 4 years. And I just left like 2 weeks ago because I've been like this whole journey from where the story started to now is I've spent 10 years in the US, very far from my family, and I want to be able to go home more. So now, taking all of the bits and pieces that I've learned from all those jobs kind of scattered around, and I'm now the narrative director on an indie game, which is super exciting, very different to AAA. Still doing all my content creation stuff, still doing a bunch of other creative writing stuff, but I get to see my family more. So it's like took 10 years for me to realize that I miss Australia. But yeah, that's pretty much my whole career up until right now.
So in Santa Monica, what was the best part of your job? What did you enjoy the most?
It's Getting to work at a place like Sony Santa Monica Studio, I always felt like, even up until the day that I told them I was leaving, that I should be paying them rather than them paying me, because I was always learning so much. So while I love the writers that I work with in the writers' rooms is really fun, and getting to work with characters that I knew from when I was a kid, like getting to build pieces of Kratos' lore is incredibly cool. My favorite thing about that job that I will still miss is when you work in AAA game development, you are constantly talking to people who have so much knowledge and so much experience for things that you will never understand. It's so technical, and they are, AAA game devs are at the top of the field. They're people with 20 years experience who've worked on games I love, and they just have this crazy, unfathomable knowledge of really specific things like hair physics that you see in games all the time, but it's really, really hard to understand. You couldn't just watch a YouTube video and get that. So the fact that I had access to constantly asking these game devs really technical questions, and anytime that maybe I'd get an email that was just sent out to a whole team and it'd be like, oh, we've changed this particular thing. Every time I replied and said, hey, sorry, I know this isn't really relevant to my department, but what does that mean? I always got a really detailed response where people were so happy to tell you. Excited that I even asked. Sometimes people would reply with GIFs, giving examples of things. So yeah, my favorite thing about working there was just access to people who are way smarter than me, who are so interesting and so eager to talk to me about the stuff that I had consumed my whole life, just on such a technical expertise level. It's awe-inspiring to be around.
And what is the most exciting part of what you're starting now, as a narrative director? How does that? I can imagine it must be very different, but how is that different from the previous experience, and what do you find most exciting about it?
Yeah, the biggest thing about going from AAA to indie, regardless of job title really, is there aren't 1,000 people telling you no, which is good and bad, right? When you work in AAA game development, you're at the whims of a lot of other departments. So sometimes you'll pitch something and then animation will say that cutscene requires a quadruped to faint or something, and that's too expensive. Things that you wouldn't even know. So you have to rewrite all the time based on what level design can do, or what animation can do, or whatever other department can do. Working on an indie game with me and 2 other people, there's 3 of us. We have a meeting and I go, what about this? And they go, great. And then we just kind of make an idea happen. The obvious downside there is that we could be biting off way more than we can chew. We don't know that yet, but it's a very exciting space to be in, where I'm not coming up with a story thing and expecting to have to shift it a million times. So it's super, super fun. It's like being kids in a sandbox where we're just let's just make the thing and see what we can do. And I'm sure we'll fail a lot more than you do with all the experience that comes with AAA. But it is already very cool to just be kind of unchained creative. Yeah, totally. Very cool.
In terms of the games themselves, you've been playing, you said, since you're about 4 years old. It's very difficult to answer that question. I know myself as a gamer. What are your favorite games of all time? What are the ones that really sort of left a mark?
My favorite game of all time is Doom 1993. That's my number 1, which is a weird pick for a writer. But I think the things that separate games I like and games I love usually is level design. Level design will make or break a video game for me. So I have a huge affinity for Dishonored 2 specifically. Anyone who's played that will know the Clockwork Mansion. Yeah, and it's just the level design is so smart that it keeps you coming back. So that is something that will keep me hooked into a game. Other favorites, totally recency bias here, but I love Tunic. I love Outer Wilds. Anything that can surprise me consistently the whole way through or is really unexpected. Tunic I rant about forever because it's dangles a puzzle in front of you, but you don't really know what it was dangling in front of you until 10 hours in, and it blows your mind when you figure it out. So the list is long. I've also got some classics, I love Fallout 3, I love Arkham Asylum, I love Pokemon Yellow. There are a lot of very basic picks in there. God of War 2018, I love that game, but yeah, level design is always my big thing that I always come back to. Is if I feel I'm rewarded by level design or rewarded by exploring the Deus Ex franchise, that'll keep me coming back.
Very cool. Thank you very much. I think that's pretty much it.
We did it.